Boom. There we go. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the JB Show on the Revolutionary Blackout Network. I'd like to give you all a warm welcome and remind you that the JB Show streams every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can catch me on the Roundtable at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every single Thursday. I also host my own channel called the JB Font Channel during the week on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Please make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you are not yet subscribed, what in the hell are you doing? Please click the bell icon to let you know whenever we go live on this channel, because you know that the algorithm does not like us. Today, I have with me Collin from the INN, the Indie News Network, activist and educator. So good to have you on with me today, Collin.
Thanks for having me on, JB. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, definitely. How are you doing today? You're in North.
I'm in DC.
You're in DC. Oh, okay.
I am in DC, as I call it, the cesspool of the world. So
the belly of the beast,
or the epicenter of the fuckery, if you will. So I am right here in the midst of it all.
Yes. You're at ground zero for imperialism and colonialism.
Yep. Other than dealing with seasonal allergies right now, because in DC it's cherry blossom season, and and they're at peak bloom right now. So, and seasonal allergies are disrespectful as hell, so having to deal with that. So you might see me coughing a little bit and all that, but I'll try and contain everything for you. But other than that, pretty good, I guess. Just obviously going through the pandemic, it's been tough mentally. I think especially for work, it's kind of a trying time right now, but at the same time, there's been a lot of good, in some ways, of going through the pandemic. And I think especially in this space, seeing more people like me who are being more represented, especially within the last 2 years, which is a great sign. And I think, just having more variety of and diversity of thought in the space. It's not always just about politics. Even though, I think for many of us, that's definitely a huge topic, but we're able to have discussions on other topics that we care about, that I think are also being introduced within the space too. So I've definitely been appreciative of seeing that and being able to be a part of those conversations in light of, just trying to make our country and our world a little better.
COVID really revealed a lot of things, not just about our country, but it also revealed a lot about ourselves. I mean, we learned a lot about ourselves and about the people around us in the beginning of COVID, right?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm very private, just naturally. And I don't necessarily like putting my business out there like that. But I think, so initially when DC was under lockdown, it was kind of like, I got to stay home and work from home and not have to interact with anybody. That sounds like a dream for me. And then a couple of weeks into that, it was just kind of like, nah, I'm not really cut out for this. I think as humans, we're not designed to be that like that. We are designed to be in community and connect. And so it really became a struggle, for me mentally, to be able to do what I needed to do and not necessarily put on the face, but, I just feel like people were just trying to feel like everything's going to be okay. You will be okay. And for me, I wasn't okay, for a good chunk of it. I fell into not severe, but moderate enough depression, where, it was trying, many days to get out of bed and kind of be like another day, especially since, during the lockdown and in time since, it just became very monotonous. It was just kind of like the same thing over and over again, each and every
Yeah.
single day. And then
Yeah.
you're staying in your house versus going out and
Yeah.
doing stuff and connecting with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it revealed to me that I am not as much of a lone wolf
Mm-hmm.
as I tend to think of myself.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, as I told you before we came live, it did teach me, how much I do uh, desire that need for connection.
Yeah.
But also, I think for me, it challenged me rather to come out of my shell a little bit more, which is why I think
Mm-hmm.
just doing this or wanting to be a part of this has led to a part of that growth for me of wanting to put myself out there or being willing to put myself out there a lot more.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting though. And I don't say this too often, but as someone who had to go through this pandemic, people would ask me, what is the difference between your life before pre-pandemic and during the pandemic? And I would say my life barely changed.
Right.
And when people hear that, they're like, wait a minute, what? Because before pandemic, I was always home.
Hmm.
During the pandemic, I was always home.
Right.
Why? Because as someone who's disabled and someone who is living, within a hair's breadth of the poverty line, I didn't have money to go out. I didn't have money to do anything. So for me, it was basically a way of life. Nothing truly really changed. And so I use my example to show that if you feel this bout of depression or irritability or sadness because of you not being able to go out and connect with human beings, take that feeling and adapt it to how many of us who are disabled feel.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then use that to advocate for, I don't have to do all the time, but when you hear about people who are disabled, and we talk about wanting to, have a living income when it comes to disability benefits or being able to go out and associate or having, even like when, companies are not ADA compliant, things like that. It's like, okay, then kind of use that feeling to say, hey, they're getting the short end of the stick to getting a raw deal. And I know what that feels like because I had to be forced into it by a pandemic, but they are forced into it by either chronic conditions or just, physical or mental disabilities. So we need to, and I kind of use, that to say it in that way because a lot of times, um, I I have this feeling, but I don't want others to feel it.
Right.
But at the same time, when others do know what it feels like, I feel like I'm no longer alone. You know what I
Right.
mean?
No, I totally get that. And I think for me, I hear a lot of what you're saying. And I think for me, in terms of I've grew up in some privilege. My dad uh, is an entrepreneur and he started several businesses. He's currently um, a funeral director based in London at the moment. And I think, especially now, given unfortunately, but fortunately for him,
Yeah.
business is doing very well, and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, you take the good with the bad, but
Yeah.
at least he's doing it to cater to our community. Like that's what his business is for, is to
Gotcha.
so it's primarily for the Black community in London.
Yeah.
So um but having that aspect, but then living with my mom for most of
Yeah.
my life, who, at one point we were on food stamps, you
Yeah.
know, so being able to relate, I'm, I understand both. You could probably guess I'm more aligned with one over the other, you know,
Yeah.
um, but I think especially when you go through some mess or a
Yeah.
storm in your life,
Yeah.
it gives you room to talk about it and then advocate for people who may
Yeah.
not have that voice
Yeah.
or can't use their voice or
Mhm.
their body
Yeah.
to promote for change. And so I think for me, as I say, I'm very private,
Mhm.
but I think just due to certain circumstances that I've had the privilege to experience,
Yeah.
some good, some bad, some in between, I'm not afforded the privilege anymore to be quiet about it. Like
I
I
got you.
have to speak on it.
I
And
got
a lot of it, I think, stems from the idea of, I feel like I'm not articulate, that articulate,
you. Don't you dare! You are articulate.
um, like, but you do doubt yourself, but I
I
think it's
do a lot.
important, like to push through that and
Yeah.
to say what you need to say
Yeah.
anyway. And I think I've been very grateful for people within the space who have encouraged me to and said to me, you know what, your voice is needed in this space
Yeah.
because you bring a perspective that, especially being a Black immigrant, that we don't hear from all the time.
Yeah.
So we need to hear your voice to give the full spectrum of what it means to be Black, not just in this country, but I think talking about the world at large, just
Yeah.
giving a larger context of the fullness of what Blackness is and
Yeah.
having the opportunity and the platform to be able to speak on that.
Yeah. And you're venturing to some one of the first questions that I want to ask, but I want to give some attention to Sweary Fairy. Sweary Fairy says, like you would never wish your situation on anyone, but when someone happens to share your circumstances, it's like a breath of fresh air since you don't have to explain some things.
Yeah.
And I honestly, uh, she said it better than I could because that's honestly how a lot of us feel. And even from a Black perspective,
Yeah.
when someone who's white gets it, and then people what we're trying to say, it's not like a white splaining, but it's almost like a translation to them so that they understand where we're coming from.
Right.
It's like, thank you. It's like
Yeah.
finally, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and there's a lot of um allies who do that, which I definitely appreciate. But I wanted to get into your perspective because you are a Black immigrant, a child of immigrants, and how just one second. I got it. I just didn't have the energy to put it together yet. But when I do have the energy, then I'll put it together. But I just didn't put it together yet. But I do have it. Yeah. Thank you very much. But as far as the energy, um, as far as what you've gone through, as far as being a Black immigrant, can you give us your experience about that here in the United States,
Mhm.
as well as intersecting that with being a leftist, particularly a Black leftist, if you can?
Oh, wow. Okay. So So, those of you who don't know, I was born and raised in the UK. My family is based in the Caribbean. My mom is from Trinidad. My dad is from Barbados. They're essentially a part of the Windrush generation. So they immigrated to the UK in the
Mm,
60s to work.
mm,
You know, that's where they met. That's where I was born, And then, long story short, my mom married a lifelong friend from her neighborhood in Trinidad who lived in the US. So they got
mm,
married in the UK, moved here to the States, and I moved in with them for 5 months. My dad wanted me back in the UK to finish my education. So I
mhm,
went back after 5 months to live with my dad, my stepmom, and my younger sister.
mhm,
Um, And then won't go into details, but after 3 years, I moved back with my mom, and I've been in this country ever since, from the time I was in middle school up till now. For me, now, I am very grateful. I wasn't at the time, obviously, as a kid, but looking back, I was very grateful for my dad, who, as a Pan-Africanist, taught me at home and my younger sister about the value of being Black and the implications of what that meant for us, you know, moving within life, basically. Like, I remember, like, when I was around 9 or 10, having to watch Roots, the original, like,
Yeah.
on the weekends for a
Wow.
time. And,
Yeah.
like, he would test us on it. Like, that's how serious he was, you know? And at the
Wow.
time, I was like, "Dad, you know, I'm in school several days a week. Why are you trying to make me do school on the weekends?" You know?
Yeah.
You know, so at the time, I didn't appreciate it and I didn't understand it. But now I'm like, I totally get it. And I am very thankful for him for it, you know, like, because I think in a lot of ways, it kind of prepared me for when I did move to the US. I knew about racism
Yeah.
prior to, but didn't have to deal with it intentionally in such a harsh way until I
Yeah.
moved here.
Yeah.
But then it was interesting, like, I had to kind of deal with, I wouldn't necessarily call it racism, whatever, but I had to deal with it among African Americans because, you
Yeah.
know, like, because I was the ethnic kid. I had the British accent. I dressed very European. I didn't act, I guess to them, I acted very proper and stuck up. So for them, and to be fair, I can understand it, you know, because they weren't necessarily used to that.
Yeah.
But being in middle school, where at that point you're trying so desperately to try and fit in, you know, and for me to kind of come into another country permanently and having to deal with that was
Yeah.
very challenging, you
Yeah.
know, and especially among people who looked like me.
Yeah.
So I basically had to adapt to what they wanted from me, which now looking back, I'm kind of very I'm angry about that because it was the idea of like I had to conform to your standard instead of you adapting to me and
Yeah.
learning about me and the perspective that I bring, you know?
Interesting.
So from there, so I was at, you know, so in my town,
Yeah.
I grew up in New Jersey up until I went off to college.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my local uh, town school for a year, and then following that, you know, I went to private school, and so predominantly white, and then it kind of flipped to, you know, being like kind of ostracized because I was different, to being almost embraced, almost exoticized because I
Wow.
was different. But it was like, oh, you're not the hood rat, you know, like that we might see, you know, like growing up in the hood. Like you're a different type of Black.
Yeah.
You know,
You're
like,
the good. You're the good one.
right. You're the
Yeah.
good one, you
Yeah.
know.
I know what that's like. So.
Yeah. So it was like, and I learned very quickly um to milk that for all that was worth, you
Okay.
know. So
You
um
probably you probably went real thick and heavy on the English accent and everything. Like, you know,
well,
cheerio, you know.
right. Well,
You're
my
like,
accent
I am
started
Black
to
and I have an English accent. Y'all gonna respect me.
well, my accent started to go away, you know, by the time I got to high school.
I got you.
So, but people knew that I wasn't American.
Yeah.
So, you know, but I kind of played into that, you know, the idea of like, you know, I may look like you, but I am not you, which
Yeah.
I think, especially in those spaces, it was very weird because among my white friends, I definitely wasn't white, you know?
Yeah.
So I can only go so far. And then among my black friends, I wasn't quote unquote black enough.
Oof.
So
I know what that feels like, to be honest with you. Oof. You
yeah.
hit me right there. Yeah. Go ahead.
So so for many years, I didn't know where I fit.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt ostracized by everybody. So I
Oh
think a
man.
lot of it just kind of played
Mm.
into, for me at that time, especially even now as an adult, kind of, retreating to myself and just being like, I'm just going to keep pushing and just kind of keep moving if it means doing things on my own, because I didn't have a community necessarily that I could identify with. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I had the opportunity to do it was based around through the church because like I grew up in the church.
Hmm.
But I had this opportunity to it's kind of like a study abroad, but I had the opportunity to live in Uganda back in 2011 for 5 months.
Cool.
And and I think that was and I think being away from America, like somewhat abruptly, and then like living on another continent, but then like another culture within another language I didn't know. And then I wasn't like in the city, like in Uganda, I was in the bush. So it was like very rural. Like I lived in a brick hut with nothing more than two beds because I shared it with a Ugandan roommate
Hmm.
and a couple of chairs, and that was it in our house, you know? So, but then that experience, I think was a lot of ways the beginning of my awakening to the reality of what life is like in America. Well, the West generally.
Basically.
But I think that was the beginning of, in a lot of ways, my political standpoint. I didn't become a U.S. citizen until 2015. Um, but since then, it kind of has helped me navigate more of my belief system and what I care about,
Hmm.
and has helped me and I wouldn't necessarily say I moved to the left. I think I was already there, but I think
Interesting.
just the experience that I had,
Hmm.
and I think being in Africa just kind of helped me to piece everything together. It was just kind of like, oh, like
Hmm.
America ain't shit. you know, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I credit it to, being away
Yeah.
from the country for a significant amount of time and then living
Yeah.
a totally different lifestyle um, from what we're accustomed here, that really started forcing me to rethink a lot of the values that I had.
Hmm.
And I think just kind of the evolution from there, kind of
Hmm.
led me into thinking more in terms of what it means. I don't think I could necessarily consider being on the left until
Hmm.
maybe about 2018, I think,
2018.
but I didn't know there was necessarily a name for it up
Yeah.
until that point.
But can you trace back that, I don't even want to say American, because Americans consist of multiple countries.
Mm,
But when you this USCN, I'm gonna start saying it like that.
sure.
This type of mentality, can can you trace that back to how you were treated, especially in the public school sphere? Because I'm kind of going back to that, because thinking about, like, for instance, you being from where you're from. In PE class, the PE teacher is not going to come out and bring out a soccer ball and say, let's play football.
Right.
They probably have a soccer ball in the shed, but it's probably in the back that probably nobody uses here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Especially in a school that's mostly black students.
Right.
Yeah, we barely ever touched the soccer ball.
Right.
The one that got touched was the American football.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so when you have the type of persona that is from outside of the United States, that influence, that American exceptionalism, that type of thought that you have among a lot of us who were raised here in the United States from from childhood on, can you see how that mindset was really driven into us from an outsider's perspective?
Absolutely. Like, and I think for me, I knew of it almost immediately, but I didn't necessarily have the words or the experiences to describe that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, I think a lot of it is, like, and this is a privilege, and I admit to that, like, having had the experiences, living in Europe
Mm-hmm.
and having, I grew up, like, I was a child in the 80s. So, like, it was a lot more difficult to travel to, let's say, mainland Europe at that time. But, but like the idea of traveling, not, of just staying in the UK, you don't do that, especially like you have access to culture and different countries, especially now. You can, from London, you can get to Paris in like under 2 hours, you know? Um, so I think for me, having the mindset of, I think I grew up having a more worldly mindset from the jump,
Yeah.
especially like with my parents, like I think I remember my mom specifically saying to me from young, and I owe a lot of this to her, like she ingrained in me the idea of travel, don't just
Mm-hmm.
limit yourself to just being in one place. Go out, explore the world, meet different people, experience different cultures. Do that when you're young. And so I think I had that mindset of having a more global mindset
Mm-hmm.
from very young. And then going from that to coming here,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that global mindset is really catered to people who are wealthy.
Yeah.
Like they have the means usually to be
Yeah.
able to travel and go out of the country. Especially within the Black community, that may not necessarily be the case, or
Yeah.
may not be a priority for them.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do travel, it might be like restricted to like if they're of African descent going back to
Mm-hmm.
Africa, or the Caribbean going back
Mm-hmm.
to the Caribbean.
Yeah.
But but I've been to the Middle East, you know, a couple of times. Like I've been in different places, not limited, but I've been to enough places where I've had enough diverse,
Mm-hmm.
like I've been around enough diversity to kind of understand differences,
Yeah.
among different cultures or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like to having to almost in a way having to kind of not second guess, but almost kind of um like push that aspect of me down to,
Mhm.
again, to kind of make myself somewhat accepted, if that makes any sense. I
Mhm.
think definitely feeling that way like in high school. And then like,
Yeah.
obviously in college, like, and again, speaks to privilege because I went to a predominantly white university. So
Mhm.
of course you're going to be around, money. So for many students, it wouldn't necessarily be a thing, especially going off like you go like to study abroad, for a semester or a year, whatever. So that was at my school a fairly common thing to do.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it was just the idea of having that mindset from, just being raised with that mindset and having to um, live among people who didn't necessarily have that mindset. But I think, again, like I think in a lot of ways when we're so tied down to racism and capitalism and a lot of these isms that I think, especially as Black people, we're kind of tied to, like you're not necessarily thinking of all of that stuff. You're just trying to think about like how to feed yourself or
Survival.
how to
Yeah.
keep a roof over your head or how
Yeah.
to educate yourself so you're able to get a little bit more money just
Yeah.
to pay your bills.
Yeah.
So I think, having to kind of um but I think for me having to grow in that idea that it's not me or it's not necessarily like if like necessarily the fault of the African American community. It's just more of the idea of like how oppressive
Yeah.
the role of capitalism is
Yeah.
among the Black community that we cannot necessarily think that way in terms of the world
Mhm.
is, well, I'm saying it this way, but being Black is being Black all over the world. Like
Yeah.
the struggle is real throughout the world for a Black person. But I think the idea of like being able to see different cultures, it's not
Yeah.
something that we necessarily talk about a lot within the
Yeah.
Black community, I feel.
Yeah. Uh, in your opinion, do you think having an international mindset shakes hands easier with being on the left?
I think so. Um, because I think because you're open to diversity of ideas.
Yeah.
And one thing I do hate in being in this space sometimes, and I think a lot of it kind of attributes to I'm older. Like I'm a little slightly older than you. So I think you definitely have this perspective too. Like, I'm not going to cancel people if you don't necessarily agree with 100% with everything
Hmm.
uh, that I believe in or agree with. You
Yeah.
know, like I feel like with a lot of people on the left, it's like not all, but many. Like you have to agree with 100% of what I agree with, and if you don't, then I'm canceling you. You know, I don't believe in that. I believe like we can differ on issues,
Hmm.
and as it may apply to culture, as it may apply to gender, as it might apply to politics. Like, we're not a labyrinth. We're allowed to have diversity of thought. But I think the key is being able to have those disagreements and being able to be respectful of those people in life, having those disagreements
Hmm.
rather than knocking them down or canceling them because they don't agree, like, with everything that
Yeah.
people on the left allegedly is supposed to disagree with. Like, we can have disagreements, but we can have them respectfully. But I think for me, gives me, and I'll admit it, I'm not great at this all the time, but I
Yeah.
think um, I'm more conscious of the idea of like being able to listen to people if they have a different idea,
Yeah.
and being able to be like, okay, but I think along with that, being able to be like, tell me more about that,
Yeah.
to get to the root of why people think the way that they do. I think we
Yeah.
also don't do that either. Like, we have a lot of superficial conversations as far as, talking about an issue, but we don't necessarily get deep as to the idea or the root cause of why people think a certain way that they do. That's the more interesting thing for me. And I
Yeah.
think not just on the left, but I think generally we
Yeah.
tend not to do that enough.
Yeah.
I think just as people. So I think, but that requires, being in a relationship with people and not like in the way of, superficial relationship, like, oh, he's my friend, just from meaning and just maybe just doing things superficially. It's like, no, I'm willing to have like a conversation with you and really being willing to have it over the course of like weeks or months or years in an attempt to better understand who you are. And so
Yeah.
for me, I'm willing to go there with people
Hmm.
if I'm able to understand them better. And I think, and I wouldn't say for, and I don't necessarily see that all the time,
Yeah.
you know, even on the left. It's just kind of, we talk about an issue, we might talk about a main talking point, and we
Hmm.
move on,
Yeah.
rather than like, let's talk, let's dive deep. Even
Yeah.
if it means like having to talk about it, maybe stop talking about it for a while, and then reintroduce that idea like a month or so later when we have a new idea or a new perspective,
Yeah.
reintroducing that idea and going even deeper. Like I don't think we have those conversations often enough, even on the left.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, basically, you're going into what are the primary driving forces that have influenced us to move up to a particular position. Like, for instance, if somebody asked me, what why are you so adamant about having a housing first culture? Was because I know what it's like to be homeless as a
right,
child. I know what it's like to be homeless as an adult. I know what it's like to sleep on somebody's couch and not having a place to call your own. And so when you dive deeper into that, and I know that's kind of more of like a more simpler anecdotal example, but a lot of times when we get deep down into why they feel the same way they feel, or why they speak about things the way they speak about, like for instance, um, there are some people who are very animate about advocating for whistleblowers and for journalists. For instance, you have Comrade Misty; she's always talking about Julian Assange. But when you get down to her personal reasons and her history,
hmm
then she talks about not being given a voice and not and basically living in a world where she's told to stay silent. It's like, yeah, well, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm also not only going to be very loud, but I'm going to advocate for people to be louder.
right.
So I think once we start having those conversations about our deepest motivations as to the why, and then couple that with the systemic issues that we face, we can actually have a better understanding. And if we are wrong about something, we can go deep into ourselves and see, maybe what my driving force behind this is kind of it's misaligned, and it's more because I need this, and I'm kind of having a hard time explaining it totally, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but I get it. And I think a lot of that deals with, if you live or surround yourself with people who are like-minded as you, you're not necessarily going to have the perspective of looking at an issue through someone else's eyes if you haven't gone through it yourself. Like, I think just even on the left, and I'm not going to name names, but we know who they are, who just kind of sit in their studios or makeshift studios and talk about these ideas, especially on the left, in theory,
Yeah,
but they haven't necessarily gone through, well, some have, but
yeah,
are not necessarily being pushed in a position where they care about it enough to want to take action on it, or they
Yeah.
like the idea in theory because it's more mainstream, but are not going to necessarily do anything about it. Like for me, like take universal healthcare for instance. Like
Yeah.
again, grew up in the UK, had
Hmm.
universal healthcare, didn't know what that meant as a child. I only got to, you know, like know of it somewhat, moving here. My mom's a nurse.
Hmm.
And I remember for me talking to me as a teenager, basically being like, she would bitch and complain with me. I remember from the time I was like 12, 13, like how the healthcare system just rips off people here. I
Yeah.
remember her talking to me about that from young, and her basically saying they don't do this in the UK. They do not do this in the UK. And my mom is probably the most apolitical person that I know. But
Hmm.
even recently in a conversation that I had with her, she was like, socialized medicine is a good thing and it should
Yeah.
happen everywhere. Um, Case of another point, like when I was in Uganda, one of my mentors there, and this was over a decade ago,
Hmm.
um, she gave birth. Um, so she went to the hospital, gave birth, and basically within a day after giving birth, she was back home. And I was kind of like, wait, like, why are you back so fast? Like typically you spend like a few days in the hospital. And she mentioned like culturally, like if the baby is fine or if the mom is fine, especially given that point she had three other kids part of past this one at the
Hmm.
time, like you got sent home immediately. Like you kind of know what you're doing, So it's like you go home. Like as long as the baby's healthy and the mom's healthy, you go home right, almost pretty much right away. Within, at least for her, like within 24 hours. And then I'm not sure how we got into this conversation, but then she told me like as far as paying for a hospital stay. Now again, this is very relative, but and this was in the bush, but it was like I think it was a private hospital that she went to like 3 miles from where our compound was. She paid $10, the equivalent of for a hospital visit. And and then so
$10.
those experiences like that is
Wow.
like, hold up. Yes, we know, like in many places in Africa, like it's real, and again, it's relative.
Yeah.
But if you're paying $10 and you essentially are paying for your stay in the hospital, and they don't have universal health care in Uganda, like, why in the hell are we paying like tens of thousands of dollars here just to have a baby? You know? So it's those kind of experiences. And I think among the Black community, you don't
Wow.
know necessarily know that,
No, we don't.
you know?
Hmm.
So this is why we need to talk about some of this stuff, but being able to get other diverse voices in this space. Because once we know, oh, in other places, they do things a lot differently,
Yeah.
and like then it could be a place of demand of being like, well, this is happening in this country. Why
Yeah.
aren't we doing it here? But I
Yeah.
think, and I think especially among the Black community, in a lot of ways, this is not by accident. That
Yeah.
like we are not segregated. I think just among like let's say white people, just as far as culture, whatever else. We're also segregated among ourselves. Like if you look at America and then the Caribbean and then in Europe,
Hmm.
and then Africa and then in other places. Like we
Yeah.
don't know what's going on necessarily in each other's countries per se or regions of the world. And if
Yeah.
we're able to have those conversations where it's kind of like, oh, this is what's happening. Oh, this is the same shit we're going through here. Oh, like this is different from what we're doing over here. Like it just forces more conversation as far as like, okay, how is it that, and I'm going to use,
Hmm.
like my mentor's example, like how is it that they're able to pay $10
Yeah.
But then we have to pay like thousands and thousands of dollars just to give birth to your own damn child.
Yeah.
Like we're not necessarily having those conversations.
Yeah.
So I think for me, all of that to say, having had these diverse experiences in a lot of ways helps me
Yeah.
to be more willing to be like, okay, let me listen to you, what you're
Mhm.
going to say. I may not agree with you at
Yeah.
the end of it, but I'm going to respect what you're saying because I know a lot of it is tied to your experiences, your culture, whatever else. And I'm going to be respectful to that in
Yeah.
terms of who you are as a person.
Yeah. It is, though, it's kind of interesting going back to, how colonially sheltered, I'm going to use that phrase,
Mm-hmm.
we as Black people are. I know more about perspective in Europe than I do in Africa.
Yeah. Yeah.
I All right. I'm gonna get canceled for this, but it's whatever. Look, look, I'm still learning, and I'm willing to accept that, and I'm humble enough to say that I'm still learning. When growing up as a young Black man in America, and you are still shocked to seeing lush green forests in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
you know you've been propagandized.
Right.
When you grow up as a young Black man in America, and you're shocked to see sprawling metropolitan cities in Africa,
Yep.
you've been propagandized.
Yep. And I will tell you right now, like, yes, there is what we see in the media here as far as like the
Mhm.
poverty.
Mhm.
But again, it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
There's poverty there. There's also a lot of wealth over there as well.
Mhm.
Same thing as here,
Yeah.
But it's interesting how, and again, this is what the power of colonialism / the media has done
Yeah.
is in Africa, how they portray, not always, but how they portray um, Black people is
Oh yes.
through, some of the movies that we
Mm.
produce. Well, not necessarily we, but like how
Yeah.
Hollywood, like perpetuate the idea of like we're
Mhm.
thugs, promiscuous,
Mhm.
like very stereotypical
Yeah.
Black American culture that is being
Yeah.
perpetuated over
Mhm.
there, you
Yeah.
know? So Africans see us and they're like, we don't want to go over there. Like, but then like conversely, you know, the media is portraying Africa in a certain way. And we're like, oh, we don't want to go over there either.
Yeah.
Like we're
Yeah.
struggling, but compared to what they're going through, like we good. Like we got
Yeah.
and like and relatively that's definitely true.
Yeah.
But but both sides of the coin are getting the same propaganda.
Yeah.
And for me, going over to when I went to Uganda at the time, like it was not strange, but I think it was just kind of sad in a lot of ways that I was the only. Now, I'm not African American in the typical sense, but I was the only Black person from the West that some of these kids who I had the opportunity to talk to and still talk to, like, I was basically maybe the only Black person that was there long term enough to really dive deep into a lot of these conversations with,
Mm.
because the majority of the people that they would see typically were white. And
Mhm.
so, and I don't want to, put white people, especially if you're a missionary, on blast,
Mhm.
but you're coming into these countries, especially countries of color, with your American talking points. And yeah, I mean, many of you are very sensitive to the cultures there, but you're still kind of tailoring some of your thoughts around what it means to be in the West, and I think for some of them, what it means to be privileged in the West,
Yeah.
when it's a lot more powerful for me, someone like me, to be going over there and kind of like, and again, like, I understand poverty to a degree, you know, like when I was out of college, I was in the AmeriCorps. So like,
Hmm.
you know, so for a year I basically lived in the poverty line. And then like, you know, I really didn't make a decent salary up until I finished my master's like nearly 10 years ago. Um, like it's a lot more powerful for us
Yeah.
to kind of go into these spaces and being like, look, one, we're here. Number two, we're not um we're not we're not like, there is some of that, but we're not all like the stereotypical view of blackness as you might have seen in the movies. You know,
Yeah.
like we have a lot more range in that.
Yeah.
And we're not having those conversations because either we're scared of each other, or in a lot of ways we see each other's struggles and we're kind of like, nah, I don't need that. I don't need to be a part of that. And I feel like, you can almost kind of equivocate that to what we see here. It's like people, especially in this space, might see the struggle, but they don't want to necessarily engage in it. Like
Yeah.
they're willing to talk about it, they can try to
Hmm.
talk around it, but
Yeah.
they're not willing to kind of engage the system in that. And so,
Hmm.
I mean, I want to kind of shout you out and RBN for a second. You know, like I love what you guys are doing, because I believe you're probably one of the first channels that I know who really want to engage people of action versus just talking around the issues. Like you're
Yeah.
trying to engage people just as far as how can we get involved and respond through
Yeah.
mutual aid and other means, instead of doing everything, you know, electorally. So
Thank you.
we don't hear that enough, I
Thank you.
think, you know, especially in politics.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to appreciate you guys for having that talking point and really being relentless in that talking point, because I kind of see that in terms of like, you know, my travels abroad, you know, especially like in Africa, you know, the same issues that we're talking about here, just as far as mutual aid, are the same issues that they need. And that's what I've been shared with. That's what they need over there, you
Yeah.
know? So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, especially in RBN, applies to
Hmm.
what I hope I want to do with my channel, as far as developing ways of doing mutual aid in East Africa. You know, like that's my area of interest since I've been there, lived there,
Hmm.
have people connected there. So,
Yeah.
but these are why we need to have these conversations among other Black people who are not necessarily African American per se,
Yeah.
because if we're just thinking in terms of just African American, then we're missing out on the fullness of what more we can talk about, just besides a limited talking point, but very
Mhm.
limited in terms of just America. We
Yeah.
need to have the Caribbean, West Africa, Europe, everywhere around the world where there's Black people, we need, you
Hmm.
know, to gain
Yeah.
that perspective, to
Yeah.
kind of understand that fullness, especially if we're not able to travel, you
Yeah.
know, but we have social media.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. You know, you touched on a very good point. Um, when we talk about being anti-capitalist and wanting to get rid of capitalism, and I can confidently say this about the members of RBM,
mm,
is that we do not just want to get rid of capitalism within the United States. We also want to affect that change in all the whole of the African diaspora
mhm,
and the Asian diaspora,
right,
as well as the white diaspora. We want to do it all over the world, because the thing is that we realize what it has done, especially to in Africa as well as in Asia and the global South. We see what it's done to us, and we do not want it to continue.
right,
And so we see how Africa is a very, very rich continent, and it has been exploited beyond measure
Mm-hmm.
because of the capitalism, colonialism, um, and imperialism that has plagued it for centuries.
Right.
And
And it's
so,
still continuing.
still continuing, yes. And so, because of that, the solidarity and unification with others in those regions are imperative for us. This is one of the reasons why I am proud to say that Josana and Nick are going to be doing basically a anti-imperialist solidarity summit
Yeah.
with people who are international, uh, so that we can also discuss these things. But I was impressed, and I started following this person, and they were, oh my gosh, I forget which African country. It might have been Gambia. But they were part of the Communist Party in an
Mm-hmm.
African country.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really experienced seeing that before,
Right.
right? Like a lot of us know now that people, his name is leaving my brain, former president of South Africa. Um,
Mandela?
yeah, Nelson Mandela was basically a socialist.
Yeah.
A lot of us are now coming to that realization,
Right.
seeing it as he
And
was.
it's great that you say that
Mhm,
because
mhm,
mm, African Americans may not necessarily know that. I think
yeah,
especially among the Black community, and I think
yeah,
we're so tied to being Democrat,
mhm.
but being a Democrat and being a socialist, it's two different things.
Two different
And
things. Yeah,
and and so and I'll say this, especially for um Black History Month just passed. And I love Black History Month. I think, it's a great time to kind of give ourselves uh some praise basically of how we've, you know, I think more your ancestors in this country at least, have really imparted a lot and given a lot in this country. But
yeah,
I think especially for me, who is not African American in that sense, I appreciate, and I think especially since being here, I've grown to know more about the African American heroes who have left a legacy as far as this country and in a lot of ways the world. I think especially when the diaspora at large. But people like Malcolm X, MLK, Rosa Parks are just a small piece
yeah,
of the change makers that exist within the diaspora that
yeah,
we don't necessarily talk about in connection with Black History Month.
yeah.
And so, I hope that those figures, especially like from the Caribbean, especially
Hmm.
from Africa, especially from Western Europe,
Hmm.
are highlighted more because
Yeah,
it gives a more richer understanding of who we are.
yeah,
But I think it also lends into talking about more of these issues. I think, especially politically,
yeah,
what they did in order
yeah,
to impact change. And it wasn't through parties,
yeah,
more often than not. You
yeah,
know, more often than not, it was through people rising up and demanding it. And so if we're able to see that, I think more collectively within the diaspora, just how change has been affected by the people versus
yeah.
governments,
Hmm.
then I think it can lend more precedent as far as talking about issues such as reparations.
Yeah.
Like I I've gone in conversations on Twitter regarding reparations within the last year,
Hmm.
and a lot of those conversations basically ended as, oh, we're so happy that you as an immigrant are, pushing for us in America to get reparations, but it's not a global issue as you think it is. Like, this is just something that we need to be concerned about as Americans. So why don't you take care of your own and we take care of ours here? And I'm kind of like, well, if the Caribbean is able to get a little ahead on getting reparations, for example, don't you as African Americans feel like that's within your knowledge base to at least be able to figure out, like,
Right.
oh, if they're able to do it, then
Okay.
again, going back to what I just said in Africa, like,
Okay.
if people are able to pay that much money towards having a hospital stay, like, why can't we do that here?
All right.
So, you know,
I'm about to get myself in trouble.
go
Sorry
ahead.
to all the members in RBM, but I'm about to get my ass in trouble, and y'all may get some heat for it too. But all right, okay. I'm gonna put some takes that may be a little bit hot, but it is what it is. Okay. As a black man in the United States, do I believe in reparations? Absolutely. But here's the thing. I also believe in reparations for the people of Puerto Rico.
Right.
I also believe in reparations for the people of Hawaii. I
Yeah.
also believe in reparations for the people in Guatemala, as
Mhm.
well as Honduras. I
Right.
also believe in reparations for the people in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Right. I also believe
So,
in reparations for people in Uganda in connection to the genocide. Oops.
oh,
Oops.
see, here's the thing.
Because a lot of that, and people don't tell you this, a lot of that is from America's complicitness in that,
Yeah,
/ the United Nations complicitness in that. But we don't want to talk about that.
yeah. And while we're at it, why don't we talk about a joint reparations between United States and France to the people of Haiti?
Right.
So my thing is that I am definitely for reparations,
Mm-hmm.
but my reparations goes beyond the scope of people that were victims of the Atlantic slave trade just in the United States. I'm also talking about the Atlantic slave trade. I'm talking about that was done by imperialism within the United States. I'm talking about the Afro Latinos that are also in the Caribbean, as
Yeah.
well as in Central and South America. They also deserve reparations, not just from the United States, but also from places like Portugal and the UK, as well as France, Spain, all these different countries as well. Because guess what? They were the ones who really literally extracted not just resources, but people from these areas in order to build themselves up. So
Right.
therefore, that debt is owed to the global south,
Right.
as well as the African nations, and so on and so forth. So when I say I am for reparations, mine goes out, is far exceeding those of just us black people here in the United States.
Right.
Do we deserve reparations? Absolutely. But I also think that it's the duty of this government to pay reparations to victims of colonialism and imperialism all over the world.
Right. And not just limited to America too. Like, Europe has to be a part of those conversations. And
Yes, they do.
I think, and this is and I'm probably going to get in trouble, but I think some people in the chat um, mentioned a couple of um, members in the Black media who don't necessarily portray in that way, as far as,
Mm.
they talk about reparations as, I think, and I see, and to be fair, do Black immigrants come in with a chip on their shoulder, believing that they're better than African Americans? Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Okay.
But I feel like, especially among some members of Black media, they talk down on us.
Yeah.
Like, because as I said, they kind of, because, and again, it's hard because I definitely understand
Yeah.
that aspect of it. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen it within my own community, like, especially in the Caribbean, like
Hmm.
I know people who would talk down as far as, oh, African Americans ain't shit, but at the same, but you're living in the country, you're living in
Yeah.
the country to use the
Yeah.
resources that you can't necessarily get in the Caribbean. So I'm kind of like,
Hmm.
you need to have some level of respect if you're going to be here,
Hmm.
as an immigrant. But
Hmm.
at the same time, I feel like some members within the African American community, especially more within the conscious community, kind of talk down on Black immigrants,
Hmm.
and kind of chastise us in the belief that, oh, I think just um, generalizing us as being like, oh, y'all, like, not all, but I think that's just kind of the context,
Yeah.
and I feel like there has to be, again, there needs to be more of these conversations,
Yeah.
like, because especially in regarding reparations, like, and especially being
Mm.
in Africa
Yeah.
and really learning about the genocide in Rwanda when I visited back in 2019. Like,
Oh yeah.
really, yeah, like, and I knew about it, obviously, like, just in terms of, kind of what I heard,
Hmm.
in the news here, but not that much.
Hmm.
But then I wasn't really into the news then, so I really wasn't paying attention to it. But
I
being
got you.
able to talk with people who were affected directly
Yeah.
about it and have the country, and there are a lot of great things that are happening in the country since then, but a
Hmm.
lot of it too is still kind of bent on capitalism as well.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
but I hold the stance, and I want to shout out Nick for a second because I know he has this attitude too,
Hmm.
like wanting to engage in the nationals in
Yeah.
this conversation as well,
Hmm.
because that's what we need. Because if we're looking for liberation
Hmm.
among us within the diaspora, then we
Hmm.
need to connect. We need to have these, even if they're going to be hard, and even, but we need to come to some level of understanding and solidarity as far
Hmm.
as um, being more united on that front, especially in terms of an issue like reparations. That,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's so sad that I think among Black people we can't necessarily get it together in a way like the Asian community could or the Jewish community could. Like,
Hmm.
when it comes to things that they need, they are like this.
Yeah.
But like, when it comes to us among Black people, it's like we're fighting amongst each other.
Yeah.
Um, or we're not talking to each other at all. And it's just kind of like every man for himself,
Hmm.
which it's something that I hate. And it's something that I definitely want to change or try and change. Not change. Well, it's something that I want to kind of challenge the idea of like being in the space and thinking about like there's another way to kind of get our point across instead of talking down to people or undermining people,
Yeah.
like to kind of either prove your Blackness or to kind of prove, like we need certain things. I don't believe you have to do all that
Yeah.
in the name of being more united,
Hmm.
as Black people. Like, you
Yeah.
can have conversations and disagree,
Hmm.
but be respectful.
Yeah. You can disagree without being disagreeable.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I want to thank Vincenzo for the super chat. It says, JB, please don't forget the First Nations in South and North America, the first victims needing reparations. Oh, of course. In fact, I'll even go even further than that. I also believe in land back.
Hmm.
And so because of that, I think that they were a people that were subject to genocide and they also deserve reparations. And their form of reparations can definitely be land back and giving it back to them, which was stolen from them in the first place. So, Vincenzo, trust and believe. I forgot to mention that. I do apologize, but I definitely do believe, especially for our indigenous brothers and sisters who are in the whole of the North and South America, I also believe that they should get their just repayment and for what has been done to them. So thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate it. Um, but yeah, I definitely do think that there has to be a larger conversation.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think that, and you touched on it earlier about Black History Month and things like that, is not just talking about, and while it's important to talk about the inventors and the singers and people like that who are Black, there's not enough talk about the ones who were revolutionary in what they taught and what they stated, not just here in the United States, but also the revolutionaries in the Caribbean, as
Right.
well as the African continent, that also would be influential for us to learn from. A lot of these people are either completely left out or they're completely whitewashed, as we've seen with MLK,
Right.
Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think it's good for us to kind of look more at these people because they're not going to be taught to us in school.
No.
They're
And it's
not.
and it's funny you mentioned Dr. King because
Mm-hmm.
I teach pre-K and we did a study on Dr. King like in January, and they were just got so into him. Like we extended
Mm-hmm.
it through Black History Month. Like we talked a lot about Dr. King. And I think even for me, like obviously I knew like how whitewashed,
Mm-hmm.
he was. But I think in studying him more with my students, like,
Yeah.
and I knew this, but I think it was a good reminder for me,
Yeah.
how like MLK was a socialist and anti-capitalist. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't talk about that. We talk about
Mm-hmm.
as far as like, oh, he was a minister, he was a man of love and peace,
Mm-hmm.
like we talk about that, but we don't talk about the idea of how anti-establishment he was, especially
Mm-hmm.
post
Yeah.
his I Had a Dream speech. I mean, he even said himself, like, that dream became a nightmare for
Mm-hmm.
him because shit didn't change much,
Mm-hmm.
like even past that. And so these are the parts of, I wouldn't say hidden, but these are the things that are omitted, like in terms of learning about um, our ancestors that we need to talk about more, and it's sad because not my parents, because my parents are silent generation, like they're much older, but like definitely like the boomer generation who lived under this
Mm-hmm.
should know better. And
Mm-hmm.
they were actively engaged in that generation. And
Mm-hmm.
now they've kind of bought into the idea of neoliberalism slash capitalism.
Yeah.
Like they now teach us, oh, like, and not to say this is a bad thing, but the idea of like, oh, you have to go to school and go to college and all that kind of stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
is fine,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not necessarily coupled with how can you continue to challenge the system
Yeah.
that we're in. Um, like I know Savvy kind of talked about that briefly with the Black church, like in one
Yeah.
of her streams, I think maybe over a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, back in the day, the Black church talked about God, but also like engaged the community as far as taking direct action through mutual aid and
Yeah.
then actual protesting
Mm-hmm.
and collectively getting together and demanded that change.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that in the Black church anymore. It's about, like paying your tithes to the pastor or whatever else for this building or whatever, or if you're lucky,
Yeah.
depending on the church, like you talk about like doing like giving money or helping out within the local community, which
Yeah.
is fine. But as I said, like being in the church and traveling abroad, and
Yeah.
especially meeting the missionaries that I had, God bless them, but
Mm-hmm.
many of them were white. In
Yeah.
fact, I would probably say, especially internationally, pretty much all of them that I knew were white.
Yeah.
And so, especially being in spaces that are predominantly people of color, and especially
Yeah.
in Africa, Black,
Yeah.
I mean, look,
Yeah.
if you have the belief that God calls you to go to certain areas, do you? Like, if you believe
Mm-hmm.
in that, fine. But I
Yeah.
think there's also a place for us, I think more so,
Mm-hmm.
to be in these spaces because that's where we're from.
Mm-hmm.
The continent birthed us,
Yeah.
essentially. And so I feel like we have more of a right or more of a claim to these countries,
Mm-hmm.
in Africa especially, or the Caribbean, that we're
Yeah.
able to go back there and be like, look, you know, here's who we are. We're coming, not to say we're coming in to take over per se. We're here to come in solidarity as far as helping helping us collectively deal with the struggles that we have as Black people within
Mm-hmm.
the diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we work together to make our lives collectively a little bit better
Mm-hmm.
than generations before?
Yeah.
We're not having those conversations at all. And I think being abroad, like, has, you know, fed into that frustration that I have, that usually, like, especially in those spaces, I'm usually like the only Black person who's from the West represented. And more often than not, like, I remember being in Uganda and like going into a village just outside Kigali, the
Mm-hmm.
capital, and like talking to a bunch of women there, with my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically were, one, surprised that I lived in the West. But then number two, they admitted like, oh, when we think of people in the West, we don't always think about Black people because
Mm.
they don't immediately make that association, because they always, more often than not, they think white,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that needs to change as
Mm-hmm.
far as, and yeah, like, shout out to people who are willing to go to West Africa, to South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
shout out to them. Like, hell, if you have the opportunity to go to Africa, go, like, I'm not
Yeah.
stopping you. But Africa is a big continent,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
like, there are more countries and much more diverse cultures and languages to learn and be exposed to. So don't just limit, if you have the means to, don't limit yourself
Yeah.
just going to the countries, like, that are part of your heritage, or like South Africa, because, everyone generally goes there because when they think of Africa, they generally think of South Africa. Go any other places where, like, the path is not as clear, so to speak,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I think actually in being in those spaces, I learned so much
Yeah.
more, just as far as, um, about myself, and helped me feel more comfortable as far as my identity as a Black man
Mm-hmm.
navigating the space, generally. Because now I'm just like, I don't give a shit what you think of me now. Like, okay, like, I'm seeing like the things that I bring not as a disadvantage, but rather as a blessing,
Yeah.
because I have the ability to force people to think of another perspective that they may not think otherwise. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm able to bring that perspective, then I think we all would be better for it. But I also desire other people to be more exposed to those perspectives too, so
Yeah.
that they're able to learn and grow. But I think especially given what we need in this country,
Yeah.
being able to defend a lot more effectively for those things that we
Yeah.
need.
Yeah. Yeah. I think going there and learning, first of all, it takes, it's a privileged position to be able to go. I mean,
Yeah.
because a lot of us, a
Yeah.
lot of us want to go. Like, I just found out that I did DNA test a couple of months ago and found out that I'm mostly Nigerian.
Me too.
So so yeah,
I have a
because
question for you regarding that because I knew that. I think I might have sent you a super chat. Did you do 23andMe or
I did
like,
Ancestry.
okay.
It was basically bought for me by a family member. So
If you
I ain't
can,
got that money. So I was
right.
just like,
If
mhm,
you can, like, I mean, doing these genetic tests costs money.
mhm.
I think it's worth the investment. But if you're able to, you should do African ancestry
Yeah,
because it's one.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a range,
Hmm.
and in your case, a country,
Hmm.
but it's another when you are connected to a tribe or tribes, as far as
Yeah,
because that, and I think given my history, being in it helped me kind of figure out, understand myself a lot more. Like, I am like my basically my dad's side is Nigerian, but then his dad's side is Igbo. My mom, his mom's side is Yoruba. But considering that, if you look at history, again, if you looked at the Atlantic slave trade, especially in Barbados, a good number of people that came over to Barbados were Igbo. So that just so it fits given the history,
yeah,
So I think it just so if anything, and there's a lot that I still need to learn about that aspect of my ancestry, but it helps knowing that there's a tribe, that there's
uh,
a language and a
that's so
culture
cool.
that I'm connected with, that I
Yeah,
can learn more about and be with people once the time is right to be able to connect with. And
yeah.
at least in my experience,
Mhm.
especially when I went to Africa for the first time, because I know that there are people who say, "Oh, I've gone to Africa or whatever else, and they mistreated me and whatever else, and I wasn't treated with love and all kind of stuff." And I have to wonder, well, how were you going in? Were you going in the context of wanting to learn and understanding, you're walking in someone's house, you're a guest in their house?
Mhm.
So you're going to be on your utmost best behavior. Like, you're not going in and telling them how to run their shit, you
Yeah.
know? You're coming in and respecting the place that you're in. Are you bringing in that Western mentality of, oh, you should cater to me because I'm here?
Mm.
So I have to wonder, if
Hmm.
that's the attitude that you're kind of coming into when you're traveling with, versus I'm here to learn from you. I'm here to respect you. I'm
Yeah.
here to gain as much information from you as
Yeah.
possible. So, and I
Yeah.
having to understand, the quality that we would expect things to be over here are not going to be the same. And that's okay, because
Mhm.
even that could be a learning experience, but at the same time, that will help you come into a place of, I think, in a lot of ways, appreciation. Because,
Yeah.
for example, um, we talk about housing here,
Yeah.
relatively, you know, like now it's not great, but for the most part, you're able to get a house here. For the again, it's relative.
Relative. Yeah.
In Yeah, I want to make that distinction.
Mhm.
Versus if you're Africa, if you don't have a home, like and no money, like you like that's it. Like, and no one is helping you. Like the idea of like we have school here, we have a public school, like you're guaranteed to go to school no matter what. Again, you can talk about the quality,
Mm-hmm.
but in many places in Africa, if you don't pay, if you don't have the money to go to school, you ain't going. And it's not like, like once you have the money, you're able to kind of continue on with your class. No. So let's say like if you're in school in third grade, and you don't have the money suddenly and you don't go to school for several years, you don't go up like you are retained in that last grade. So like when I was doing some volunteer work in certain schools, I knew like children who are 15, 16, who are like doing fourth grade level work because
Wow.
they were like due to different issues as far as may not have had money to school or something happened to their family, like they may not have been able to go to school for maybe several years or whatever, or due to certain issues.
Yeah.
And that's the reality that they have to deal with over there,
Mm.
in many places. So, so it's like, so it just gives you the perspective of, yeah, things suck here, especially for us.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of things too that I think in certain ways we are better off, relatively so,
Mm-hmm.
compared to our African brothers and sisters on the continent that we
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily talk about. But these
Yeah.
are the issues that I think again we need to understand and learn so that you're able to have that perspective. But I think in doing that, you're able to understand how the role of racism is a mighty cloud for
Yeah.
us here.
Yeah.
Because I think we tend to stick in that vein all the time because that's what we're inundated with all the time, you
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't see often in certain ways how blessed we are, you know, and how racism kind of blinds us to some of the privileges that even if we're poor in certain ways, like we have some privilege in certain cases compared to our African, cousins.
You're speaking of like a Western privilege.
Sure. Um, Probably. Um, I think in certain things, you know, education I look at one in particularly,
Mm-hmm.
um, like not always, but you're able to get government assistance for like basic needs, like food, for
Mm-hmm.
example. Again, not great. That doesn't exist, in Africa, you know.
It.
So again, I'm saying this like a disclaimer to everyone in the chat. This is a relative issue, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but I don't want to say it's apples to oranges. Again, it's just a difference of culture, a difference of living, you know, but like but I would also say in certain ways for me, for example, and I'll just use my experiences, like
Mm-hmm.
again, I told you I lived in a hut. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have running water,
Mm-hmm.
so in order to get water, I had to go to um like there was a community tap near me that I had to walk to like a few hundred feet or whatever and get a jerry can, a big ass can, you
Mm-hmm.
know, fill it up first thing in the morning, put that can in the sun for it to heat up during the day. And then at the end of the day, when it was somewhat heated, like get a bowl, and go in the stall that was attached to, my hut and wash myself. I had to do that every day. Or if I
Mm-hmm.
was lucky enough being able to heat water from a kettle, in order to bathe myself. So some of the things I think that we kind of take for granted here
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was a luxury over there.
Yeah.
Like the idea, like I have a phone that I could call for pizza right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it'll get here within the next 3 minutes. if I wanted to have a pizza, and again, I was in the bush, let me make that clear, I had to make that myself.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
like that would be like an all day affair. So
Yeah.
again, I'm just saying this in terms of being relative, but I think assuming that you're able to have basic needs met
Hmm.
here, that's not always a guarantee in Africa, or the things that are kind of basic of what we just kind of expect. It's
Hmm.
not always a given over there, especially if you're
Yeah.
like considered poor.
Uh, would it be fair to say that because of what many people in Africa experience, especially in the rural areas, that is more akin to the influence of raw capitalism from the West that has influenced that type of lifestyle? Or do you think it's just it's more inherently just African culture that has influenced that type of, I guess, way of life?
Hmm, that's a good question. Um,
Because I'll give you the reasoning for my asking.
sure.
Here in the United States, we have what's somewhat called a mixed economy, right?
Hmm.
Some of our things are paid through taxation, whereas we have to pay for things through out of our pockets. Uh, being that Africa is, as far as resources goes, very rich, but is constantly being extracted.
Right.
And being that many, if not basically all these African countries have been colonized in some way, shape, or form by the West, there's been an influence of these capitalistic forces that say, if you don't have enough money to go to school, you just don't go to school.
Right.
Would that be more of the influence of Western capitalistic forces?
I would
Or
say in that case, yes, to some regard.
mhm,
Um, I would also say that's also kind of attributed to the corruption that exists anyway among leaders
mhm,
in these African countries too. But again, you can argue that a lot of them are affected by corporate interests,
I
and
got
you
you.
can fill in the blank too. Like it could be from the
Mhm,
West, or in certain cases, it could be China as well.
mhm, mhm,
So, but I do think I definitely agree with you. There is definitely a capitalist bent,
yeah,
especially more westernized, like in my travels there, that I'm like just in what and certain people were asking me or saying to me,
yeah,
like for example, like the idea of like the youth wanting to be educated in this country.
mhm,
It was kind of like, first of all, why would you want to come here? Not to say you shouldn't, but like, like I had to tell them, it's like, look, it's not all roses over here. Like you're coming in as a black person and then coming in as an immigrant, like that's a double whammy for you.
yeah,
Like that people don't necessarily talk about, you
yeah,
know. But where does that come from? You know, that
mhm,
comes from the idea of feeling like even in my country, and again, depends where, but
yeah,
even in my country, I'm not going to get what I need in order to thrive.
mhm,
That unless if I had the money, um, that I'm not gonna make it.
mhm,
And it's almost kind of like for a certain youth, like the dream of
mhm,
being educated in the West. And some might just want to choose to stay, or, like thinking like, oh, I can go back. I know plenty of people like in my family group that I worked with, certain ones now, they're not even, who are older now, are not even in the country in Uganda anymore. Like some are in Dubai, or like I had a friend who was thinking about going to Turkey for a while to get work. You know, so the idea that you cannot think you're going to thrive in your own country, I think it's sad. But I think that a lot of it takes to a lot of the raping of these resources. And then I think the Western influence, as far as like the individualism, I think that's definitely becoming, not to say it's becoming more prevalent, but I'm seeing more of that mindset kind of taking hold for certain, like especially among the youth. That I think is a little more accurate. Like it's the idea of like, I have to take care of myself. You know, and I'm going to do what I need to do in order to, you know, make it, which it's not to say it's a wrong mentality. It's just a different version versus kind of from a more socialist aspect of working within the context of community. You know, like I have, like in the last 10 years, I've seen the idea of like individualistic mentality of kind of eating away, you know, like especially among the youth. And I think especially being more connected as far as social media and all that kind of stuff has made it worse, if anything else, because they have more access and are able to see a lot more over here. And they're kind of like, oh, if I go over here, come here rather, or anywhere in the West, then things will be better for me. Which is kind of like, and that's why I had to kind of have to step in and be like, you gotta rethink that, because it's not going to be any easier for you if you come over here. But they're kind of stuck. And so that's my frustration. But
well, let me ask you this, and if you can give me your thoughts on this. I don't know, maybe I'm just making a statement and seeing where you go with it, but if we were to quell and dismiss and damn near destroy this individualistic mindset that we have here in the United States, I honestly do think that let's say hypothetically a revolution does happen here in the United States. Hypothetically.
Well, you're saying hypotheticals, but it almost happened.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Let's speak it into existence, shall we?
But I think it's important to say this. And let me give you an example. I think especially regarding George Floyd, BLM. Like, because there was for a brief period where people that I hadn't spoken to, who happened to be white, who I hadn't spoken to in like years or whatever else, all of a sudden just felt the need to call me and check in on me and ask me how I was doing. And I'm like, well, I haven't spoken to you. Are you just calling me just to combat your guilt that you might be feeling? But one of the first people that called me were my Ugandan friends.
Wow.
Who asked me, Uncle, is everything okay over there? And so that did two things for me. It was kind of like, number one, you saw that. So the idea of like, like, okay, social media is actually doing really good. But then the other thing was, it was like, this is what I've been trying to teach you for the last 10 years that just due to your experiences, you weren't able to kind of get. And now you got it.
Yeah.
And so, and I mentioned this on a stream that I did with DJ Joe Nice. The fact that the NBA were willing to go there.
Yes.
And then who stomped it down?
Hope and change.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas that could have been an issue where Black people in the diaspora could get united behind.
Yeah.
And the corporations saw that, and they got Obama to put an end to that.
Yeah.
And it's sad that we're not talking more about it. I'm actually kind of pissed off that BLM hasn't talked more about it, but they're co-opted now, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But we don't need to talk about because it happened. We were so close to it happening.
Yeah, we were close.
You know, and it got snuffed out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we don't have to imagine it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's a matter of, in this instance, of Black people being aware, Black people checking in, and working in solidarity, but then like not allowing corporations to overtake our demands. You know,
well,
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what I was basically trying to get at was basically saying that if this were to be if this were to succeed, and we change from a less individualistic mindset in a nation nationally to a more collectivist mindset and change our systems, that could be a positive influence on African nations. Number one, to do the same so that they can also change their systems to be more collectivist in their systems so that they can build themselves up without any intervention from the West.
I want to flip that.
Okay.
A second.
Okay.
Because here's the thing, at least in my experience. Now, the children that I worked with were, I don't want to say orphaned because not all of them were, but like deal with families or whatever, you know, different things. Like the compound that they were in, like, you know, they were taking care of, like it was children's center essentially. So, you know, but so some of them may not knew who their family was, or like if they were there, they might see their family like during their time off from school, whatever. They will go visit their family and come back, or whatever. So while their immediate family, like there may be some mess there. What I noticed there was, at least in Uganda, like at least in East Africa as a whole, like they're very militant as far as knowing tribally who they are. Like they may not know all their family members, but they damn sure know where their tribe is.
Got it.
Because that's their culture.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't want to talk about countries, because essentially the countries that are in Africa now are essentially a European construct. Europe created those countries. In Africa, you go by tribes generally. So, and there was more consistency in talking about, like, that was the issue with me. Like when I went over there, they were trying to figure my ass out. Like they were trying to figure out, like, because they would kept asking me, uncle, where are you from? And I basically gave them like the spiel, basically. But they kept asking, like, uncle, where are you from? And I kept getting mad because I'm like, I told you where I'm from. Like, I'm not going to repeat myself. But then it clicked. I was like, no, what they meant was, where am I from in the context of the continent as far as my tribe? And so when I got that understanding, I think immediately what happened that I thought about was, well, why don't I know that part? Especially, well, definitely more so now, but I think back
we know
then,
why.
idea of right. But I think especially with you know, genetic studies now, you can more like, not always, depending, like if you have enough European blood in you, it may come up like, oh, you're European. But like there are ways to find out now. Like, so I would argue, I say all of that, like I would argue, and this is what I learned, like there is solidarity among African tribes.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we need to learn in terms of let's learn from them what it means to be in solidarity together as far as culture, tribes, whatever major issue.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we extend that to bridging the gaps among the fullness of Blackness
Mm-hmm.
globally? Like,
Yeah.
because I think there are elements within the African culture that exist that we need to regain. Because the idea of this individualistic idea is not necessarily in our DNA per se. That idea just came from, the West, and then like colonialism, and then just the idea of the West is very individualized anyway, just through history or whatever else. Again,
Yeah.
it's not a wrong way to think about it, but it's just a very different way of viewing the world. Africa, countries in Africa, especially in tribes, think of them in terms as a group, especially within the family group.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I do well, the group does well,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a mentality that I think we need to reclaim as
Yeah.
Black people,
Yeah.
like which we've lost. And
We've
so
lost it. Yeah.
um like and I've seen this consistently, in the countries that I've been to. Like their immediate family may be mess, but they know what tribe they are. And that's what connects them. Like we don't necessarily have that here. Like we say,
Yeah.
oh, we're tied to this country, or we might
Mm-hmm.
be tied to this town, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever else, but it may not be necessarily something that we hold on to as far as a collective mindset of thinking necessarily. So I want to argue that instead of us imparting that to them, they can
Mm-hmm.
impart that to us,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense, because it's there.
Yeah.
I think again that's being chipped away,
Yeah.
just due to colonialism somewhat, but the idea is still there, even among the youth. So I think that's something that we can take on and kind of learn from that and
Yeah.
build that into,
Yeah.
okay, how can we, in light of all these ideas, collectively bring them together?
Yeah. Honestly think that we were reverting back to having more of a collectivist tribe in the past,
Mm-hmm.
but because of the colonial and capitalistic forces, they saw that and they were like, okay, we got to put this on the chopping block. We got to get rid of this because the thing is going to ruin
Well,
us.
no,
And,
because yeah, because like when Black people get together, we
mhm.
change the world.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
but when we do that, everyone benefits.
and the reason why I'm saying and here's how I'm saying this, and here's how it was done, was that back in the day, um, we as Black people, if you did something wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you broke a window, you were doing something you weren't supposed to be doing. You come down the neighborhood and Mr. Carter saw you.
Right.
Oh, you were going to get in trouble. You were going to get in trouble with Mr. Carter. You're going to
Right.
get in trouble with his wife, Mrs. Carter. Then
Right.
you were going to get in trouble with your auntie who lived a couple doors down. Then
Right.
you were going to get in trouble with your mama and your daddy.
Right.
Or if they saw you doing something good, Mr. Carter may do a little something for you.
Right.
Then Mrs. Carter may, make you a meal or something.
Right.
Mama and daddy were going to be proud of you.
Right.
And so that whole African proverb of it taking a village to raise a child, the capitalistic forces saw that.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, how can we break this up?
Right.
So then, guess what? Then you had the drug war.
Right.
And you saw them taking, especially a lot of Black men, out of the communities
Or
to kind of
infiltrating ideas within our spaces.
Yeah.
Again, the Black church is one.
Yeah.
Like schools is another.
Mm-hmm.
Because these were, I think if you look at it in terms of America, these were our spaces where collectively we would get together, we were in community, but we also use these spaces to organize.
Yeah.
We use these we use these community areas to think about mutual aid,
Yeah.
but we were, and it's funny you say this now, because even eh, like when I lived in this was in the 80s. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember in my old neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
like I knew pretty much every kid
Mm-hmm.
and every adult, and it was a diverse neighborhood, at least at the time. It's become more gentrified now, but but at least at the time, it was a working class neighborhood in East
Mm-hmm.
London.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I knew who the kids were in my neighborhood. I knew who many adults were in my neighborhood. I remember during the summers or when we had vacations, we were all playing in the street, just
Mm-hmm.
running around. And funny enough, there was a lot of drugs,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of mess was happening around that. I never knew that. It's not to say I didn't know. It was just not a thought of
Mm-hmm.
safety because of the adults
Yeah.
that were kind of around me and and all the other kids, that I never had the idea of being scared.
Yeah.
That never had a thought in my mind. Unless you're living in a more affluent area now,
Mm-hmm.
you can't think that way, especially in low income communities.
Yeah.
That is a thing. So I think even that idea is a fairly, in my opinion, a fairly recent phenomenon,
Yeah.
because we used to have that,
Yeah.
but I think, again, as you were saying, the powers that be,
Yeah.
drugs,
Yeah.
all these, a lot of that has kind of affected a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that community standing, where
Yeah.
we just kind of keep to ourselves now,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
is sad. And as I
Yeah.
said, that's a mentality that is slowly beginning to infiltrate itself in
Yeah.
African cultures,
Yeah.
which I'm kind of like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Hold on to that, you
Yeah.
know.
But one of the things I think that they didn't count on in traditional African culture, from what I've been learning, is that the women and the matriarchs were the strongholds,
mhm,
right? That's been passed down, especially in Black, American spaces.
right,
So they didn't count on that because they thought the strongholds were going to be the men, and so
right,
they were like, okay, we're going to ship them off to prison, basically, for using substances that pretty much are natural to us. And so they thought, oh, the women won't be strong enough to, to keep the whole things down. Yet the women within our spaces in Black America, a lot of them were strong enough to hold things down because traditionally, you know, women were seen as equal to men, especially from African culture on down. The
yeah,
only reason why they're seen as lesser now is because the onset of colonialism and imperialism, things like that. Those decrepit and disgusting ideas of making one gender better than the other.
right,
And so a lot of us were raised by our mamas,
right,
and the strength that they had were instilled into us. And so a lot of us now are taking that and running with it to basically keep that mindset of equality and things like that. And so we're combating this colonialist mindset that was being forced upon us, because I'm a child of the 80s,
mhm,
and I do have family members that were subject to the drug war,
right,
and it's like they were trying to break us apart.
mhm,
Um, and they succeeded in some ways because that's exactly what they were trying to do. To push this individualistic mindset so that we wouldn't have because we carried the tradition of tribes with us,
right,
right? And the tribes just became our hood,
right,
right? And now they saw that and they were like, you know what? The tribes, they still came with them. We got to break that apart, and so they still try to do that. One thing I appreciate is that now we're trying to revitalize that, and I want to give a shout out to people like Rome, because he is actively trying to travel around to revitalize that mentality of hood, tribe. Those words can now be interchangeable. They both pretty much mean the same thing, as in being together collectively, uniting together in order to build ourselves up.
Right. Or Nick,
Mm-hmm.
who,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I know he shared, you know, when he was on the Bernie Sanders campaign,
Yeah.
being able to openly have dialogue.
Yeah.
About,
true.
and he met with people who, you know, may not necessarily agreed with him, just as far as his stance on Bernie, but by the end of the conversation, as he has shared, that, you know, they were able to get to an understanding, you know, like as far as, or how he helped them kind of realize, oh, like it doesn't matter for party, like, because if we broke it down, we eventually, like, in a lot of ways, we want the same thing.
Yeah. Definitely.
And that's kind of what I see, you know, like collectively, you know, like, you know, thinking about this globally within diaspora. Like,
from a global perspective,
like the media will tell you, oh, there are different needs in Africa versus different needs in West Europe versus different needs in the Caribbean. Like, I know enough at this point where I can say, like, essentially, we all want the same shit.
Yeah.
They just use whatever means to make you think that we don't. Like, they'll use party, they'll use whatever to make you think like, oh, like if you're a black Republican, you ain't shit. If you're a black Democrat, like you're this way, or if you live in the hood like this, or if you like whatever else, like they'll use every tactic that they can to divide us up, as you've said, I think very correctly. And that's why we need to have more of these conversations among each other, especially outside of our space. You know, because it's very easy to get into an echo chamber and kind of talking to people who think of like mind like us. It's a very different matter to get outside of that bubble and being able to talk to people who may not necessarily think what you think, but if you're able to get down to the nitty gritty of the things that are important, you will find that, oh, this ain't shit ain't much different than what we go through here.
I think that's part of the. I think that's part of the grift, or I should say, I think that's part of the trick of colonialism, is to make us think, well, you guys obviously need things differently than us, and it's like, wait a minute, are you saying that I'm not a human because I don't have the same human needs that you do?
Right.
Because look, we all need food, clothing, shelter. We all have dreams, aspirations, fears. We all have these same things. I don't care if you're alabaster white from Iceland, or you're deep dark and mahogany and you're from Sudan. We all have the same basic needs universally. So therefore, the world is actually should be one single tribe, but there are some people who think that they're better than others based on the way we look, and so they want to say that, oh, our needs are different, when no, our needs are exactly the same. We all need oxygen to breathe. We all need water to drink. We all are. I'm gonna put it out there. We all need to get it on, if you know what I mean, because we are human beings. Hello, let's be real. We all have needs for romantic connection, platonic connection. So we're all so much alike, to the point where it is really imperialism and colonialism that puts a dividing point between us to say, oh, you guys don't need that as much, which basically translates to saying you're not as human as I am.
Right.
And so that, I think, is the bamboozlement of the cultures that have been making us look like, okay, I know we're going a little over time, but this conversation
No,
is so damn good.
no, we'll
But
keep going. I'm
okay,
here for you. So
all
we're
right, let's
good.
keep going, and I'll get to the super chats really quick in a second. I'm sorry, but I just have to start in my head. I don't want to lose it. But when you're a Black American kid and you're looking at somebody who is from the continent of Africa who's an immigrant, and your way of insulting them or insulting other kids, Black kids, is by calling them the phrase, "Oh, you just an African booty scratcher,"
Sure.
right?
Or another
You're
flip.
perpetuating that mentality that somehow people who basically are from the continent that your ancestors are from are somehow less are more inferior, or they're less than. You are literally perpetuating this colonialistic, this superioralistic mindset that has been fed down to you basically from your governments, basically from Western mindsets. And it makes you think that because they're more primitive, by virtue, they are less human than you are.
Right. Or I'll flip it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in
Please
West
flip it.
Africa, or if you're in West Africa in particular, you might
Mm-hmm.
heard the phrase akata, which,
I heard that before. I
yes,
heard that.
I
Please
forgot
explain
from
to
what
me.
movie you heard this from, but essentially it's cotton picker in terms of like, you know,
Oh.
so
Oh shit.
so
Okay.
but that's what I mean. It's the idea of like, and this is something that I think, especially in some circles, like we kind of perpetuate a lot. And that's
Yeah.
some bullshit that I'm like, we need to stop that shit,
Yeah.
because, and this is exactly, you want to call it white supremacy, you want to call it whatever you want to call it. But
Okay.
that's designed to attack each other and not
Yeah.
being willing to go in our spaces like that in the sense of, like if you're Black coming from this country, having a chip on your
Yeah.
shoulder, being like, oh, African Americans ain't shit, or like looking at Africans or whatever else and being like, oh, you think that you're better than me because you are from this country or whatever else. Like, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, again, like Black is Black.
Yeah.
Black is Black. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, my British like nationality, it's not going to help me with the cops. like even if I had my British accent still, they're still going to lock my ass up.
Yep. Yep.
It
Like.
doesn't matter if if I have a master's degree. I do. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
I have two, really, technically.
Oh
But
shit. Hey.
that means shit. Because
Yeah.
as Jay-Z eloquently said, you're still an N-word,
Yeah.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, so we need to kind of, and I'm saying this and I'm going to put this out there to all, to African Americans, whoever are watching this, as a Black immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
I want to formally apologize to you all for the perpetuation of us coming in America with what your ancestors have built to make it a way for me to come into this country. And not to say it's been great, but like to be able to get what I've been able to get here as far as my education, like my growth in this country has been in part mostly due to the people like from your background have fought for. And I'm not going to disrespect your ancestors directly for the sacrifices that they've made in order for me and others like me to be able to come here with the opportunity to do well. So I want to formally apologize to any African American who's felt like Black immigrants have kind of infiltrated in their space and not respected them. Like, I want to formally apologize to that. I personally am very aware of that. And that's something that I'm very conscious of. You know, living in this country now for over 30 years. It's like, as I said, like in the same way, like, well, I pretty much live here now. So like I've been Americanized as hell. So like whatever. But like I'm coming in your space. You know, I have to respect you in this space. You know, I'm not gonna have a chip on my shoulder, think that I'm better than you because maybe of cultural differences or whatever. You know, because ultimately we're birthed from the same region of the world. And if I'm going to disrespect you, my brother, you know, on the light of a few cultural issues or whatever else, then what does that say about me? You know? So I'm saying that because I know that happens, you know, on the Black immigrant community, that there is I wouldn't say disdain, but like there's almost like a superiority complex as far as thinking that we're better than you guys.
I got
You
you.
know?
I got you.
It does exist. And I, for one, hate that shit because that's not adding to any solidarity at all. And that's just buying into like the capitalist, corporatist, whatever it is you want to name, like where we need to figure out how we need to work together in order to uplift some of these issues that collectively as Black people we deal with.
I think that we're all victims of colonialism,
right?
Whether your ancestors were born here in the United States and or brought here to the United States as slaves, or you were from Africa or the African diaspora and your family members were stolen from you and taken as slaves, you're still victims
Right.
nonetheless.
Right.
I just want to, Josana, love you too. And she made an interesting point. And I just want to bring this up. She said recognizing it is respectful, but no need to apologize. Our ancestors fought for all of us as a universal family. The feeling is imperialist, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, because, and I think that's the mindset that we need to have, which is why I think, especially in regards to reparations, it gets me so frustrated to say, like, for African Americans to say that's an American issue, and like as a Black immigrant, like I just need to worry about my own. I mean, I very well could, but I see the benefit of, as I said, when Black people collectively get together, we change shit, and when we do, other people benefit. Like, look at what happened as far as, you know, just looking at American history, what Black people have been able to do that now collectively as a country, everyone benefits. So I think, so we need to kind of come off the mindset of this is just an issue among a certain country or a certain region for a lot of these things. But collectively, what can we do as a collective group where we're able to have some solidarity among these bigger issues that are tied to Blackness overall?
Well, you know what, and you bring up a good point because there's something that a lot of us Black people who are born and raised here in the United States, we have something that we also need to work on. And I'm gonna kind of jump off of what Josana said. It's funny. I feel that way from African Americans toward Black Latinx community. Look, I'm gonna be real. All right, that superior feeling that you said that some Black immigrants felt towards those of us who are Black Americans. a lot of Black Americans were expressing that, especially to Black Latinos,
Right.
as well as Haitian people.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody goes, oh, no, that's not true, bullshit, because it experienced, especially here in Central Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So much so to even be a Black person and be called a Haitian was considered an insult.
Right.
So we those of us who were born here who are descendants of slaves in this country, we also need to check ourselves when it comes to Black immigrants, especially who are Black Latinos or Latinx, as well as those who are from the Caribbean, and looking down on them.
Right.
Because guess what? We're all in this together.
Right.
And for us to sit here and look down on others who may come from a poorer country or from a more exploited country and think of ourselves as better, we are just perpetuating that same capitalistic, colonialistic, individualistic mindset, which they have subject ourselves to.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're not being any better than them.
Right.
So I think that I think the influence has affected those of us just as much. And I think that this has to be a water conversation that we need to adhere to.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I get to the super chats before it gets too late. Egg 64 says Obama ended the strike so he could view the finals. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, because he was hoping and changing for the finals. It wasn't for actual, liberation.
Right.
Cryptician says, JB Collin, awesome enlightening discussion here. Thank you so much. I've been seeing you throughout the chat, Cryptician. Thank you so much. And Violet Blue says, yes, fight the supremacy mindset, time to end the system of labels, categories. The construction of race was to distinguish who was not white. Thank you so much for that, Violet Blue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Now go ahead, please. Collin, you can go. Yeah.
No,
to my point. Sorry.
No, I agree. Basically, yeah. I think end of the day, yeah, hate against Haitians. Yeah, and I lived in Boston for 17 years. So yeah, so like, and like I said, so that's kind of why. So all that to say, that's kind of why I wanted to have my channel, and this is kind of by extension, I'm involved with INN. And I want to shout out, Indy for inviting me to be on his network, to be able to uplift, some of these issues. But I think also just to give people that we don't hear from often enough, especially in Black spaces, a voice, because, like, it pains me. I mean, it's so like just the people that I've met, like, in Africa, like for over the last decade, there's a lot of, there's so many, not to say, of course they exist, but like just accounting to the creativity and the, like the intelligence, and I think in a lot of ways even stronger than us in certain ways, because they have to figure out how to do shit with no shit. Like,
yeah, they do.
Like,
yeah.
So,
They're
but
brilliant.
The creativity to be able to make something out of literally nothing, I think, is insane. But the ideas and the things that they think about, like that they were able to kind of teach me and kind of expose to me. Like, but the things that they want to do, like I know youth over there that are hungry to impact change. Even in their communities, they don't have the resources to do it. And these are the voices that I want to uplift. And like, and actually, funny, not cool story, in a lot of ways, I wanted to start my channel out of a promise I made to a friend. Because several years ago, the last time I was in Uganda, like, and I basically, I first met him back in 2011. He was one of the older kids that I worked with, and like we butted heads, like frequently talking about various issues. But it was good for both of us to kind of understand each other, and like and most recently, like he ended up starting a clinic in a village outside of Entebbe, which is one of the big cities in Uganda. And he wanted to start this clinic essentially to, kind of similar to what Rome is doing in a lot of ways.
Oh, cool.
But to run a clinic costs money.
Yeah.
And he had, like some people who were willing to invest in it who happened to be white, but it kind of fell through, or like they weren't as full, like whatever. So like, so one of the things that he asked me, and like, I would love to give him that kind of money in order to help keep him going. I don't have that kind of capital, to my name, but like, and this is the kind of frustration, like there are people there who generally want to do good, who are motivated, but financially or whatever means are not able to. And one of the things that this young man asked me is, please tell the people that you know in your country about what I'm doing so that I'm able to do this to help my community. And that's really what we should be doing. Like we should be, and this is kind of where I kind of fault the Black church in some instances.
Okay.
Because this is the type of work that we should be coming behind. But I think just generally within the scope, like it's easy to kind of talk about social issues, I think more domestically.
Yeah.
It's a lot different when we have to think about in terms of thinking outwardly, especially internationally, and not forgetting our cousins overseas.
Yeah.
Who, and this is kind of when I say the relative issues that we have between, I think, if you look at the global South and then the West, like collectively, like we have a lot more going on for us here collectively. That can you imagine, like, if we kind of pulled our resources together, even in this country as Black people, what we're able to do. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot.
Yeah.
But if we pull together our resources, and it doesn't have to always be financial, it could be, like experience or knowledge about certain things or certain topics. Like collectively, if we pulled all of that together, and being able to be like, go to our cousins anywhere in the world and be like, this is what we have to offer you.
Yeah.
Let us support you in the work that you're doing, but then conversely, having us be in a place where we're able to rediscover what we lost due to our history, of being able to connect with family again, to be able to kind of connect with this socialist idea of being one, as far as like a global tribe, of Black people. So that's what I would love to see ultimately. So I wanted to give, the hope for me is to give people whose voices we never hear from.
Yeah.
Like, and I love, as I said at the beginning, what, there are more Black voices being represented in this space. I mean, like coming from watching just Nico House and Tim Black initially to having, you, Sabrina, Rome, Nick, Afeni, and other people who look like me being more represented, I think is a beautiful thing. And it's giving me encouragement to be in this space as well. But we need a lot more. and we need more of that diverse thought of Blackness so that we can kind of see, like, we're not so different at the end of the day, and ultimately we all want similar things.
Yeah.
I think the understanding of how, like, there's a place that we should be able to come together and
Yeah.
have these conversations, and they're going to be hard conversations, but being willing to have them so that we can understand, like, the role of history that just played to fuck us over,
Yeah.
is mutual in every region of the country where Black people are living. Like, the feeling is mutual in each of these spaces.
Yeah.
And I think once we understand that and then start to think about, okay, well, what can we do about that?
Mhm.
Then I think, um, then I think that, yeah, we can do some good. But I think being able to take care of each other first, and by extension, being able to take care of the world. That's what I love to see.
Yeah.
Like like as far as my dream, and being
Yeah.
in this space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely appreciate what you're doing. And, I'm glad that you are in this space with us and we're in community with you because it is deeply important. Um, I would just wanted to kind of do something fun right before you go.
Sure.
Is that cool with you? I know
Yeah.
we're a little bit over time, but I just
No,
wanted to.
that's fine.
All right. Okay. So, uh, I put out a tweet, a couple minutes before I went live, and I said something about traditional African
Yeah.
garb,
Yeah.
and I'm like, man, this looks so comfy. And if anybody knows me, like right now, this shirt is not comfortable.
Right.
Like for me, it would be like a really soft long sleeve shirt or t-shirt and some. Look, I'm literally wearing pajama bottoms right now. Y'all just can't see it. I
Right.
didn't want to wear pants for this episode, but I decided, well, I guess I should. So I wore pants.
Right.
Clap for me, please. I wore pants. But when I was thinking, because I used to be very religious,
Yeah.
and had people from different African countries. We had people from Gambia and other places that would come, and sometimes they would wear to church their traditional
Hmm.
African clothing. And there'd be times where I would be jealous, damn envious,
Right.
because I'm like, oh, that looks really comfortable.
Yeah.
That looks so comfy. Case in point, hold up. Let me show y'all just how comfy this clothing is. Like, I'm just like, what in the hell? Like, why aren't we dressing like this? Hold up. Wait a minute. Look at that. That right there,
Yeah.
that is clean.
Yep.
Like, hold up.
Yeah.
Wait. I'm looking at this stuff. I'm just like, good
Yes.
Lord. Like, that looks so comfortable.
Yes. I have
Like,
a couple of those pieces, actually. If you scroll down,
okay.
that's the Black Panther shirt that T'Challa wore. Go down.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, right. Oh no, go back up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that black shirt.
Mm-hmm.
That's T'Challa's shirt in Black
Oh,
Panther. I have that shirt.
oh my goodness.
I have that shirt. But you know what? It's funny because I tweeted back at you
Mm-hmm.
and say they are. But you know what? Like, not funny story, but
Mm-hmm.
my dad would get a lot of these clothes and he would just give them to me, but
Yeah.
I just always had the idea of them being so, like, that's something that you wear like on a more formal occasion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was just a mindset that I had prior. And then Black Panther came out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, that totally flipped the script for me, as far as wearing African clothing. Yes. That is
Oh,
more
look at that. That is
right.
gorgeous.
Yeah. Like, but the idea of wearing African clothing that in a more casual state,
Mm-hmm.
like, if you look at my closet now, like the majority of my clothing now is basically like mostly African inspired clothing or patterns, basically. But I also just think generally like men's fashion is boring as fuck. It
Yeah, it
is.
is. It is.
It is.
Especially here in the
It
United States.
is.
Like, what?
It's boring as fuck. That like I wouldn't want to be a woman, but I appreciate women's clothing because I feel like they have more options. Like with men, like you are very limited as far as what you can wear or the way you can wear certain clothes. So I love the idea like with African inspired clothing, like they play around with texture, they play around with color and like yeah, so it's just like it's just so much more cooler to me and a lot more, like yeah, I'm all for it. And like and I'm glad like wearing that stuff now, is I think especially really since I think in a lot of ways Black Panther just really opened the door. I think in a
Yeah.
lot of ways
Yeah.
for it to be more accepted and have it be a lot more commonplace for people to wear all the time that
Yeah.
I'm all about that now. Like really now all I buy generally it's like especially if it's place is Black owned,
Yeah.
like I buy that mess all the time. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I love it because it's usually a lot more colorful. It's usually plays around with patterns a lot more, and it's more interesting, as far as to what Western style clothing for men is.
Oh
So
my
yeah,
God. Bro, dude is looking clean in this thing.
yeah. So
Yo, bro, I'm going nuts right now. Like, yo, and dude, I'm just thinking about how comfortable it is. Like, you
yeah,
don't have to be, because look, let's be real. Whenever you see those period pieces, those European period pieces, especially
yeah,
when they were in like the Dark Ages, and the Queen would be wearing that stuff, and she had all the ruffles up to her neck. I'm just like, isn't it hard to breathe in that? Like, good Lord. And then you look at this, you're just like, ah.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I
just like you
mean,
can feel the wind,
yeah,
It's crazy. It's awesome.
yeah. I mean, I love wearing African clothes now. I love it. But
Oh,
then it gives people like will stop you and be like, every time I've worn something like that on the street, it's like people will always stop me and be like, "Yo, dude, where'd you get that from? Like, that looks real cool," and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just, yeah, my only regret, not regret, but like I wish it was highlighted a lot more. I think,
mm.
because look how colorful this is,
Yo,
and
like
like,
I feel horrible for people who are colorblind right now because if I could, I would get y'all some Enchroma glasses because this is bright. I'm just like, what? Like,
yeah,
I'm sorry. I know I'm geeking out right now, but look, even though I'm a guy, and guys typically see basic colors, traditionally, as far as scientifically, when it comes to our eyes, we see like just basic colors. Me, I, for some reason, can see a wider spectrum of colors, even though I'm a man.
yeah,
And so for me, it's just like, well, I mean, I am gay too, so, but whatever. But anyways, so it's just like pop.
right,
It's just great, and you can also see that influence even in Black American culture
yeah,
with even how we dress. We can get a little flashy, you know what I'm saying?
right. But
So
I
I
think,
think,
yeah, but I think a lot of that. I think growing up in Europe, especially,
mhm.
like, well, I think one, and my parents are from the Caribbean, so
Yeah,
like, there's a context of like, especially as a Black person,
yeah,
you dress to impress, and so
yeah,
like, so I remember even at school, like, my parents, basically, I remember like I wasn't allowed to pick my clothes because I
yeah.
would pick when I was little because I would pick the most boring
Mm.
like, and both my parents are very flashy when it comes to how they dress. But
Yeah.
like my mom made sure even when I was going to school that I dressed well. And
Yeah.
like, so I think there's a lot of that kind of comes into play. But yeah, it's like African clothing is just so much more fun and just so much more colorful and like and it's unique and yeah, like I love it. I love it.
Um,
I can recommend a couple of places you should shop at after this. So
that. Oh hell.
yeah. But yeah,
Yo,
African clothing is the bomb.
that's the shit. I'm telling you. Like what? Oh my gosh. Yo, I just want to do this short little segment on this because I'm just like,
Yeah.
I didn't like,
But that's what I'm saying. That talks to the creativity
yeah,
and of African culture African cultures in general, and like how diverse it is. And like, yeah, and it's like you're not gonna see this necessarily on, Fashion Week here. Like, you're not gonna
it
see
ought to be.
anything like this anyway. If anything, like, you're gonna see some weird ass shit that looks abstract as hell, and people call that fashion. And I'm like, I'm not gonna wear that. I'll
Yeah,
wear this,
yeah,
you know? And I think that is just as flashy and it gives as much attention, but it's very like clean and precise. And especially for many of these cases that are handmade, so it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of, precision in order to create something like this,
yeah,
so, like, um,
yo.
so there's a lot that goes into African clothing that I think people are not knowing about that I wish people knew. But
Yo, don't let me show up to a photo shoot with some of this clothing. Do not let me show up. And it's in my size because I'm a fluffy dude, so
I know
and let me
no,
show up.
I know places that are your size. I'll send you a couple of links after the show. One in particular where I shop at frequently. So I got you. I got you.
Oh snap! I'm telling you, look. Oh, and yet, Acheres, yes, craftsmanship. Oh my god! Look, I wish that you saw like a red carpet and you saw dresses like this. Like I'd be out there. I'd be out there like what's her name, Joan Rivers.
Right.
Who are you wearing? I
Right.
would be just like that, you know.
Right.
Oh
But you know
my
what?
gosh.
I do think of like someone like Lupita Nyong'o who has worn stuff like this before on like similar to this
All
on the
right.
red carpet before. So
All right.
like shout out to her and others who are
Yeah.
willing to go there. But I
Mm-hmm.
think again, like it should be represented more, in Western spaces, like as far as wearing clothing like this.
Mm-hmm.
And because they still get the attention, if not probably not even more so, but it's still clean. It makes sense, and it's just a lot of fun to wear, and it's very cool to wear. Like as I
Yeah.
said, I wear that stuff all the time now,
Yeah.
you know, at
Yo.
least just to kind of represent the idea of like we can wear it. And also it's not, as I said, like I just thought of it initially as more traditional, like you wear for special
Yeah.
occasions. I think the idea of like now I could just wear it going out to the street
Yeah. Yeah.
just to go like grocery shopping and
Yeah.
have it not be a thing,
Mm-hmm.
But I think what that
Yeah.
also does for me, it helps me feel more connected to that culture, but think
Yeah.
also, especially if it's a Black owned business, which
Oh
typically
yeah.
they are,
Yeah.
like it's a way of representing my community as well, and so putting my money in my community.
Yeah.
So I think that's just one way where we're able to show solidarity is, you know,
Mm-hmm.
put your money in places where that cater to you.
Yeah.
So if we're able to do that more, we'll be a lot better off. So
Yeah.
I try as often as I can to, you know, go to places that are Black owned,
Yeah.
depending on what I need. Like I try and make a conscious, I can't always do that, but I always try where I can. Like I
Mm-hmm.
try to. And I think
Yeah.
that's important that we should be doing. Like I know there's certain times of the year of where it's like, oh, I think especially like Black
Mm-hmm.
Friday or whatever, oh, buy Black and whatever. It's like great that we're doing that, but we should be doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Like we shouldn't wait for certain times of the year to do that. We should
Yeah.
make a conscious effort to do that anyway,
Yeah.
because they need our money anyway.
Yeah.
So
And look, just as a side note, and I don't care who hears it, y'all can come after me all y'all want. But as a queer man, Lupita Nyong'o is fine as hell. She, if I was straight, shoot. But I'm so stupid. I'm so goofy. I'm goofy as hell. But she is like, hey, girl, looking like melted chocolate, looking so good. Anyway, I digress severely, but first of all, that's actually a good question. Creative Experiments asks, what type of material is that? Are you aware of what type of material is that? Because I really don't know.
um
I know it's breathable.
yeah, I'll have to look. I think it depends on what you buy. Because sometimes it could be made out of cotton. I actually don't know. I wish I knew that more.
I wouldn't be
Hon
surprised if some of it was like silk or satin or something like
Yeah,
that. Something that was
like
very light,
yeah, yeah. So
Oh, Josana, she says it's usually silk and cotton.
cotton, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. More
All right.
often than not, it's cotton.
Okay.
But I think again, it depends on what it is.
Yeah. It's very
Um,
breathable though. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I forgot exactly what I was gonna say. I actually made myself forget what I was gonna say. Damn you, JB. Gosh. What in the hell, man? But yeah, one of the things that I honestly do agree with you is that it can make you feel closer. So that's something that I would like to see. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Thank you. Um, I also think that this should also be classified as, like, for instance, the one that, like, the shirt that you saw, like the Black Panther one
Mm-hmm.
that Chadwick Boseman wore. Rest in peace.
Please, yeah.
Um, that should also be. We should normalize that also as business attire. I think.
Yes. Yes.
A
Yeah.
suit and tie shouldn't always be the same. Always business Western business attire should
Right.
not always
Yeah.
be the set standard.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, like I wore that shirt. Did I wear that? Yeah. I wore that shirt to a funeral.
Oh wow.
I wore it
Okay.
actually when my uncle passed away um over Christmas. I went to his funeral.
I'm sorry.
His memorial service rather, and I wore that shirt. So so because I think it's the idea of like
Yeah.
something like that is considered a suit.
Yeah.
So, and essentially, like, in the way that it was shown in Black Panther, that was like a priest slash, like, because I think if you look at the movie and the comics, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea, like, for like Black Panther, that was it was a king role, but it was also kind of like a priestly role. So
Yeah.
a lot of what T'Challa wore, I think, especially in the movie, you saw like had a lot of that influence there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was the idea of like wearing a suit. So, But as I said, I love how it's more it's always been there, but I think now, especially like we're seeing this a lot more in the West, where there's a lot more diversity in that clothing now, or at least you can get it a lot more available now, where it's a lot more casual too.
Mm-hmm.
So you can wear those similar patterns in like a shirt or shorts or pants or a
Mm-hmm.
coat, and have it be like as I said, you could just go to the grocery store and wear that shit
Mm-hmm.
and not have it be a thing. But
Yeah.
every time I wear something that is like African inspired, I'm always stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And people ask me, wow, you look good. Or where did you get that from? And all that kind of stuff. So every single time without fail. So, like, but yeah, like I said, I wish this was represented more on red carpets,
That is.
um, here. So, because they look great. And often than
Mm-hmm.
not, they're very tasteful and, but it's just how the pattern might be designed or the cut, that makes it stand out. And it's like,
Yeah.
you don't have to go like in the crazy stratosphere in order for you to stand out. Like,
Yo,
so
Colin, I think tasteful is an understatement. This shit is classy. Like,
yeah.
classy. Like, look at that. Look, just
Yeah.
in
I
white.
mean, QKR anarchist said, from living single, Carl Barker, who the TC Carl,
Oh,
yeah, would wear
yes.
that all the time
Yes.
on the show.
Yeah.
And
TC
so,
Carson.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So goes your point. Yep.
Thank you,
So,
Quaker.
yeah.
Mm. By the
So,
way, it was better than Friends. Let's just put that out there. Living Single was better than Friends, and plus, let's be real. Friends was a ripoff of Living Single. I said it.
no,
All right.
I didn't watch Friends at all. I was in my teens, so I watched the Fox lineup.
Me
So I
too.
watched Martin, Living Single, and New York Undercover. That was my Thursday nights. I didn't watch
Yo,
Friends. I didn't watch Seinfeld because I watched those three shows during that block.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. And everybody knew that Kyle Barker, the way he dressed, was cleaner than the Board of Health.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So
All right, so we went way over time. This was such a great conversation, man. I am so happy that I had you on. This conversation. Look, I was expecting the conversation to be good, but
right.
I wasn't expecting to be this good. You know, I was just, how it's like when somebody cooks something, you're like, and they're a good cook. It's like, okay, I'm expecting the food to be good, but I didn't think it was to be slap your mama good. Like, damn, man. Like, I am just glad to have you here. So,
And
thank
like
you
I
so
said,
much.
you're very easy to talk to. And I think credit
Thank
to
you.
you. I think
Thank you.
I've known you through Twitter like
Mm-hmm.
all this time.
Yeah.
But I think what I've appreciated about you and really the rest of RBN, honestly, is how authentic you guys are. And I think it's hard, I think especially being Black
Mm-hmm.
podcasters in this space, like we're under
Yeah.
more scrutiny than anything else,
Yeah.
and I think, like people expect more of us. I don't understand why, but like why we know why. But
Yeah.
like but
Yeah.
but there's a lot more expected of us, and we go through more scrutiny
Yeah.
compared to our white counterparts. But
Yeah.
I want to give you guys credit for,
Thank you.
getting your feet wet and like being willing to make mistakes in this space, but growing from them. But I think being authentic, unapologetically with your audience, as
Mm-hmm.
far as what your goals are, and making that very clear
Yeah.
to that. But then, like I said, it's great to have more people who look like me and
Yeah.
think of like mind somewhat to
Yeah.
represent some ideals and have it be like, as you said earlier, like this person gets me, and
Mm-hmm.
have that, be a sentiment that like I can get behind those people because they get it.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to kind of go for the song and dance and try to make or force people to understand who you are.
Yeah.
Like it's just a lot easier when people kind of like, I hear you because I've been through that, or I
Yeah.
understand it
Yeah.
because just due to my experiences. And I'm so, I appreciate you guys
Thank you.
in this space, but doing it in a way that it's not demeaning. That's
Mhm.
not like looking down on people or being almost militant in your
Mhm.
approach, that you want to be inclusive of anybody. It's just like
Yeah.
you're Black podcasters who care about the issues, but you want that solidarity among everybody, which
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't see that a lot in the space.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate you guys, and I think especially you for being very authentic as far
Thank
as
you.
your approach to this.
Thanks, man.
And
Thank you.
yeah, so I'm really, so just thank you for
Mhm.
allowing me to be on this space with you too.
Thank you. And thank you. Thanks to Bill Bradley. You said you two are great together. Doing this semi regularly would be cool. Trust and believe, Bill, that Colin's going to be back. Even if he doesn't like it, I'm dragging his ass back here. So,
But yeah, I will give a shout out a little bit. So I'm not sure if you knew this.
Mhm.
I'm actually going to be starting a new show with Reef Breland.
Oh, cool.
I think we're actually going to start this week. So I think just basically kind of similar to what you guys do in RBN, like or what Savvy does, like once a week. At least right now, it'll probably be me with Reef, but then we're hoping to get more
Okay.
regulars on. So having guest people come on. So I know you're definitely going to be on board at some point, but I'm going to be starting doing that in addition to my channel, Komawo Mukwano, which I'm
Mhm.
going to save specifically for issues like what we talked about today.
Mhm.
But then like for anything else, it's for INN. So
Okay.
so yeah, I'm going to be more visible in the space now,
Mm.
as
Cool.
I'm going to be working towards both things.
Nice.
So yeah, so you'll see me a lot more besides on Twitter.
Cool beans.
I'm
Cool
gonna be
beans. Cool
working on
beans.
Twitter.
Yeah. Quaker says, can you all check out Black Power Media? They are Black radical liberation focused, great programming to build on the liberation fighters, deep connections to abolition, prison, and Black Panther. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've heard of them before too. I need to look more deeply into them,
yeah,
but I appreciate that, Quaker.
yeah. Just anyone who, like, as I said, I know of a few who are in the Black media space, but
Hmm.
anyone else, people in the chat can recommend, just let me know, because I'm definitely always interested. Not to say I agree with every like Black media person in the space, but I would try to just listen to as many people as I can just to hear those
Yeah,
perspectives.
yeah.
So the more, I just think, just overall, the more diverse voices we hear, especially in the Black space, the better. So
Hmm. Yeah,
overall,
yeah,
so just anyone who can recommend more, then yeah,
hmm,
definitely
yeah.
send them
And,
to me.
mhm. And where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at shoot. I think it's Obona, I think _Colin.
Hmm.
That's OGBONNA _ with 2 L's. And
Hmm.
then Kumano Mukwano is my YouTube channel, which I think uh it's in the chat. Or if you look up INN, you can find my listings there. But
Yeah.
mostly, as many of you guys know, I'm a wild child on Twitter. So
Yeah.
find me
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually
I
have the links in the description. So if you
Yeah,
guys want to get just a quick,
yeah,
link over to there, just go to
yeah.
the description below and just,
And
go
then
there.
like I want to actually make a point. I want to start like a Black panel to talk about similar issues of what we talked about today and have it kind of be more of a regular thing.
Oh, okay.
So if there's anyone who is open to being on camera, especially like if you're an immigrant, or like I want as many Black voices and diverse Black voices as possible. So if you're interested, let me know, because I want to try, if not in April, in May, to have our first episode up for my channel. So anyone who's interested, let me know.
I was gonna say it, but she said it before I could.
Yes, Jasana, I'll DM you, Jasana. So yeah, but yeah, anyone else? I'm especially looking for like new people, like who people like may not necessarily like. Again, I want to bring on people who we do not necessarily hear from. So just like obviously want to have a mix of people like you, Sabi, Jasana, Nick, Rome on, definitely. But we want to uplift as many Black voices as possible. So anyone who's, again, willing to get on camera and share their opinion, let me know.
All right, this sounds pretty good. And any final thoughts did you have for today, reflecting on everything we just talked about?
I think just overall we need to have more discussions like this. I appreciate you having me on and talking about my perspective, which is different, but I think valid, considering my skin color and everything else. But I think the more conversations that we have, like, I don't always agree with you on everything, but but I'm able to have solidarity in you as I understand you. And but I think the more conversations we have like this, I think the greater understanding that we have of each other, and I think just talking about how, I think just realizing how much more connected that we really are than not. And I want others to kind of, especially if you're Black, to kind of see that too. We need to get off the idea that depending on the region in the world that we're so different that we can't connect with each other. I don't believe that. Like, if anything, there are things that we all need that we can mutually agree that is needed. We might disagree. There may be discussions of how we get there, but the idea of just the basic human needs of living are mutual among all of us. And so collectively, we need to have those discussions collectively as a group, so we can kind of get off the idea of this group of Black is better or worse, whatever. Like, as I said, that's the type of bullshit that needs to be cut, from the legs. We're all Black, no matter what. We need to respect each other for our Blackness, and we need to encourage each other in our Blackness, in all shades of it.
Gotcha. You get the last word. Thank you so much to having Collin here from his channel, Mukwano, and from the INN. If you guys are new to the channel, then please make sure to give this a like if you like this. If you give this thing a thumbs down, I know where y'all live. I'm coming to see you. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know where you live. No, I'm not coming to see you. I don't care. But but if you give this stuff a thumbs up, then I may come to your house and I may give you, some pie or some hummus. Who knows? I can give you something, just to thank you. But but also, if you're new to the channel, if you haven't subscribed, what in the world are you doing with your life? Come on, give JB a subscribe, please. I'll give you 4 head kisses. Mwah. Okay. Also, please make sure to, if you guys got a little something extra, then you guys can subscribe to Patreon. If you want to donate directly to me, JB, then I also have some links in the description below as well. Please make sure to water your plants as well and water yourselves, because water is the juice of life, people. Also, to make sure to leave the world better than you found it. And you guys always know what I'm going to say, right? You guys know. Smoke him if you got him. Toasty! I love you.